Transgender characters are more than just their gender. Let's talk about it. Hello my cheerleaders, my name is Charlie and welcome back to my channel. And it feels weird every time I say that, but y'all pick the name, so y'all gotta live with it. Alright, so today we're going to continue my Pride series on writing LGBTQIA+ characters, and we're going to talk about writing trans characters. This is a really hard topic because this could just be how to write characters in general, because there is no one right way to write trans characters. So if you're writing a trans woman, trans women are real women and thus should be written like a woman. If you're writing a trans man, trans men are real men and should be written like a man. This should go without saying. The one thing that you need to be careful about, especially if it's something that you've never experienced yourself and you are not heavily employing a multitude of sensitivity readers, is discussions of dysphoria or trans bodies. Why do I say this? This is the way that trans people are reduced to little more than body parts and suffering. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times this has just been the point of a trans character in a story, is that they're either hypersexualized and objects of some sort of fetish, or they're just there to suffer, feel all the pain, all the feels constantly. And the reason I say you need a lot of sensitivity readers for this is if you've heard 5 trans people talk about their experiences, you've heard 5 trans people talk about their experiences. Again, as with the lesbian, gays, bisexuals, and ace characters that we talked about in the previous episode, trans people are not a monolith. As such, let's talk about the big bugaboo in the room. Don't be a trans medicalist. What does that mean? Transmedicalism is a 2-part fallacy. Part 1 stating that a person must experience dysphoria in their body in order to be trans. While dysphoria is common to many trans people's experiences, it is not a requirement, nor is it something that is shared amongst all of us. 1, the experience of dysphoria varies so much from person to person as far as what triggers it and how the actual emotions are felt, that it's difficult to pin down in and of itself. You don't have to be dysphoric to be trans. Simply knowing that you are existing in the wrong body is enough to be trans. The second part of the transmedicalist fallacy is that, well, you have to have surgery or some other form of medical transition to qualify as trans. There are no qualifications. There is not a survey that one has to fill out and tick all the right boxes to be considered fully and wholly one of the community. Trans people are valid no matter how they present. This is an extremely privileged point of view. Not everyone can afford hormone replacement therapy because it's expensive and a lot of insurance companies do not cover it. Not to mention all of the testing one has to receive prior to getting access to HRT and the constant testing one has to endure once on HRT to make sure that your hormone levels are balanced and it's not causing other damage to the body. No one takes hormones lightly. Transmedicalism is a plague on our culture and on our society because it basically says unless you are privileged enough to be able to afford proper medical treatment and have exactly the same experiences as I do, then you are not worthy of being considered a valid human being. And let's be honest, we should not be segregating humans based on privilege and wealth. And now just to say a word about the NBs. People like me, non-binary folk. There is a whole bunch of things that fit under the label of non-binary, just as there are a bunch of things that fit under the label of trans. Trans, which is, by the way, an adjective, and must be followed by a noun when used, so a trans person, a trans man, a trans woman, a trans person. A trans person is simply somebody who does not identify with their gender assigned at birth. There's a distinction between gender and sex, and I'm not going to get into it, but I highly recommend that you check out the numerous videos by people like Riley J. Dennis, Ash Hardell, Jesse Gender. There are a lot of them. There are a lot of really good ones out there. Jamie Dodger has an entire series of these, and I highly recommend them. Kind of a fan. If you do not identify with your gender assigned at birth, you are a trans person. If you identify with one of the binary genders, you may be classified as a trans man or a trans woman. If you do not identify with something on the gender spectrum, or if your gender is expressed with a certain amount of fluidity, then you, my friend, are non-binary. You are a non-binary person. Non-binary can be everything from someone who is simply gender fluid to somebody who is maybe bigender or agender or a demi-boy or a demi-girl. There are actually quite a few different subheadings that fit under non-binary. I, personally, am a gender fluid person who bounces somewhere in their gender expression between being agender and being demi-girl. I am not female. I am not male. And to be honest, the vast majority of the time I do identify as a demi-girl, but I do have very long, profound moments of my life where I do not feel any gender at all. I do not identify with any gender at all. Now, this is where we could go into deep levels of philosophy, and that is not something that I feel comfortable doing right now. Just because this video is going to be long enough without me spending 2.5 hours talking to you about epistemology and ontology and teleology and all of the things that we would have to get into.
Not to mention the metaphysics.
To discuss why someone is trans and what that experience is. Suffice it to say, a non-binary person such as myself does not experience gender in accordance to the rigid binary. An easy way to understand this is to see the genders that are presented in society as jobs. Women are assigned certain roles. There are clothes that they are allowed to wear. There's certain ways of presentation that they are expected to participate in. Not identifying with these roles does not make one trans. It makes one gender nonconforming. Someone can be gender nonconforming without being trans. The difference between somebody who is trans and somebody who is gender nonconforming is that a trans person identifies as something other than the gender they were assigned at birth. So a tomboy still identifies as a female, just a gender nonconforming female. And we can have a very long and philosophical argument also about whether or not tomboys are trans or tomgirls are trans. Everything's up for debate these days because, have you heard?
We live in a society.
Okay. The main thing to understand is there is a sense of constriction, a sense of alienation from the gender that was assigned at birth. My advice to you, if you are wanting to write a trans character and you are not trans yourself, is talk to trans people. See how they talk about themselves. Realize that they are characters in their own right. They are people in their own rights. They will have their own loves, wants, and ambitions, and may or may not talk about trans issues all the time like a certain somebody does. On the other hand, they may be obsessed with trans issues because it took them a long time to find out what these words meant and to figure out who and what they really were and to have some sense of normalcy in their lives. Not all trans people are activists, though simply being out of the closet is a radical act of activism, but that's a whole other issue for another video. I'm sure I have confused you more about trans issues now that we've talked about them than before. The easiest thing that I can say when trying to write a trans character is do not make it about their body. Do not make it about their suffering. And unless you're trans and writing from your own experience, don't make it about their experience of gender. Make them real, fleshed out characters of the gender they identify with. Do not dead name them. Do not use the wrong pronouns for them. Once you set them and go forward. I don't know how helpful this video was. I really don't. I wrote notes and notes and notes about things that I could say that would hopefully help you understand all of the various issues involved here. But this is really the one thing that I want you to take away. Trans people are not, they're suffering. Trans people are not balls of dysphoria to be pitied. They're not to be sexually fetishized. Trans people should be respected and treated like any of the other characters in your work. I hope that was helpful in some way. If you have any questions, do put them down in the description box below. I will either answer your comments down below or in a follow-up video, but please let me know exactly what your questions are, because like I said, there are so many ways I could have gone with this. I wanted to just cover the bare bone basics where I see people really getting it wrong. While you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell. I stream several times a week. And if these videos have been helpful to you, don't forget I have a Coffee and a Patreon, links down below. Thank you ever so much to everybody who does that. You have no idea how much you mean to me. I would not be able to do half the things that I'm doing without your support. And until next time, remember that this world is a nightmare hellscape that is not going to get better if we don't actively stop Asian hate. If we do not remind people that Black lives matter, that Black trans lives matter, and that trans identities are magic. And until we meet again, may you have the courage to write your dreams into reality. And don't forget to have the fun. Bye.